Today's episode requires a small content warning. This episode contains a mention of sexual assault and an incest-based relationship. It is only a brief mention, but one that still required a warning. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Baal's least favorite son, still tied to Daddy's apron strings, I see. High Harper Jahira. Welcome, humble adventurers, to my realm of knowledge and mystery. Here, in my cursed library, are endless tomes and scrolls on the darkest and evilest foes in all the realms, be they from Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, the many worlds of darkness, or any realm in between. Welcome to the Dastardly decimal system. I'm your caretaker of the corrupt, the librarian, Castor Cain. That's weird. Awfully quiet today in the library. I can finally put away some of those books I've been meaning to do. Vega, are you knocking books over? What book do we have here? Sarevok Anchev. Oh, we haven't talked about him in a while. And if memory serves, he just underwent quite a bit of change. Oh, you want to hear about him, do you? Fine. Why don't we go and look back? But first, let me brew some Chatali Tea. It's a tea brewed from the leaves and seeds of a plant that will only grow in the jungles of Cholt. It's actually a favorite of the Mesro royalty. It was often served with cinnamon, sugar, and milk. Let me pour myself a cup, and once again we can talk about the ball spawn known as Sarevok Anchev. Sarevok Anchev was a monstrous human male, standing well over 7 feet tall. He had purple tattoos across his body, and when angered, his eyes would glow a sinister shade of yellow. He wore a set of spiked full-plate armor made from a darkened steel. His helm is shaped like a skull with jagged teeth in place of his visor, fashioning his frightful image after an avatar of Baal. His helm granted him dark vision and protected him from fear. His magical armor protected him from most arcane elements, and his gauntlets could store the spell of wizards within it, allowing him to cast them at his whim. His weapon of choice was the Sword of Chaos, a magical greatsword that could drain the life of any foe he hit and transfer it to him, healing himself in the process. He wore an amulet of Baal that caused his inflicted wounds to be slow to heal, allowing for continual damage as his foes bled out. Sarevok spent years training in the magical and martial arts. He was a powerful warrior with enough strength to wield a greatsword in one hand. He was a Deathbringer, part of a cabal of warriors who excelled in war and intimidation. Deathbringers also had the ability to slay foes with but a single look. Sarevok was a shrewd manipulator and deceiver, twisting his foes, his allies, and even his family to do his wishes. Sarevok was also a cunning man. He had spent years studying in the Great Candlekeep Library, intent on putting his intellect on par with his strength. Sarevok was not a man without emotions. He has loved twice and is capable of compassion, but do not mistake this for weakness. His power and will to murder is unmatched in his time, and surpassed only by a rare few in ours. Revisiting an old foe can sometimes feel like seeing a friend from high school. Years have passed since you have last looked upon one another, but somehow, despite the knowledge that you know they have probably changed just as much as you have, you still expect to see the same person you once knew as a child. It's weird to look upon this old friend, especially when they are struggling. You feel sad because their lives are not what they could have been, or you feel sorrow to see them fall into a dark path. This is the case of Sarevok Anchev. Sarevok Anchev has found himself involved in so many major events in Baldur's Gate. Some were by his own hand, like the Iron Crisis, while others he aided his brother in resolving, like the revenge of John Arenicus and the brutal war known as the Ballspawn Crisis. Even after 130 plus years later, Sarevok has found himself yet again in the middle of a new event, one known as the Absolute Crisis. But how had Sarevok changed in the centuries that had passed? When we last look out upon Sarevok, he had been resurrected and saved by his half-brother, Abdel Adrian. Sarevok aided his sibling in the defeat of John Arenicus. Then the brothers came involved with stopping the machinations of Aimlisan, High Priestess of Baal. Aimlisan had united 5 of the strongest Ballspawn into one powerful army. This included Abazagael, the blue half-dragon, Balthazar, the human monk, Ilisera, an elven warrior, Sendari, a drow cleric, and Yagashura, a fire giant berserker. She set them out on a campaign to slaughter the rest of the lesser Ballspawn in the hopes of resurrecting their god, Baal. But this was all a ruse. As with each death that the army caused, she secretly siphoned the ball sparks into herself in an attempt to becoming a goddess. This was known as the Ballspawn Crisis. Abdel Adrian, as he was akin to doing, saved the day once again, but not without the help of his allies, including his brother Sarevok. Baldur's Gate applauded the hero and rained praise down upon him. They bestowed upon him the title of Grand Duke of Baldur's Gate, the very position that Sarevok had coveted all those months ago. So as one brother began to settle down, the other had become restless and discontent. With his divine spark gone, Sarevok had suddenly found life lacking. It was dull and listless, like a painting without color. He had once held a sliver of godhood in his veins. He had even briefly touched that divine power, but now everything was simply pale and empty in comparison. Desperate to find something to fill that void, Sarevok set out across Toril. He began by traveling to Kara Tur in order to bury Tomoko, the only woman he ever truly loved. Then he set out to make a name for himself. Words of his deeds began to trickle back to Baldur's Gate. When an orc army marched upon the city of Burdusk, Sarevok single-handedly routed them. When his numerous deeds of good did nothing to appease him, however, he attempted a return to evil. Sarevok marched on Westgate as its conqueror, but abandoned that plot shortly after when it provided him no joy. Sarevok was desperate to feel joy, to feel pain, excitement, or, well, anything. He had disassociated himself so much from reality that he was little more than an emotionless husk. He even went as far as to travel to the infinite planes of the abyss. All this did was cement a fact that he had been denying for years. His immortality and godhood was gone, and nothing in this world or the next could ever fill that void. Sarevok fell into depression and vice, squandering his wealth and health on booze and drugs. On the day of Abdel's death, Sarevok was little more than a homeless old man, begging in the streets of Baldur's Gate for coin or booze. In that despair, a familiar form appeared before Sarevok. Baal, the god of murder. Back from the dead, the god was rebuilding his empire. He saw potential in his son, and made him the leader of his new cult, once again giving Sarevok a new purpose. Sarevok spent years rebuilding the cult of Baal. He recruited any priest and follower of Baal he could, and even returned to the once abandoned temple of Baal that secretly resided beneath Baldur's Gate. This was the same temple he had used during the Iron Crisis. Now, it acted once again as his base of operations. During this process, Ball met a female doppelganger and with her produced a female heir. Her name was Helena Anchev. Born a Ballspawn, she had the same great power within her. Sarevok doted on her, telling her of her greatness until it was all she could think about. He raised her like a brutal princess of Ball, manipulating and twisting her mind until her devotion for both Ball and her own father was unwavering. She would do whatever either asked of her without question. While under her father's control, Sarevok bed his own daughter, producing an incestuous child as the outcome. This was Orin the Red. Sarevok claimed to love both of his changeling daughters. They were the inheritors of his essence. They were also his path to being Ball's chosen. In the world of Toril, a chosen was a mortal imbued with divine power. This would be a gift from one of the gods. It gave that mortal a level of power comparable to that of a demigod. Sarevok wanted that power, and to get it, he would sacrifice one of his own Ballspawn children. When Orin was only 8 years old, Sarevok convinced Helena to kill her own daughter. He manipulated his eldest, telling her that only by performing this action would Ball be happy. Helena readily agreed. Shockingly, the assassination attempt failed. Not only did Orin survive, but she was able to kill her own mother. This murderous action caught Ball's eye, and instead of granting Sarevok the rank of chosen, he gave it to Orin instead. Now, with his adult daughter/granddaughter by his side, and accompanied by a dragonborn sorcerer known only as Dark Urge, Sarevok leads the cult of Ball beneath the streets of Baldur's Gate. When the absolute crisis was in full effect, a hero, sometimes referred to as Tav, arrived at the cult's door. They were looking for the Netherstones. These magical stones would allow Tav to exert their control over the crown of Carseus. When Tav showed up, they did so with familiar faces by their side. Minx, Boo, and the High Druid Jaheira stood by Tav's side. Sarevok recognized Minx and Jaheira immediately. Both were former companions to Abdel Adrian. Sarevok labeled them both as traitors. Tav tried to fool Sarevok by declaring them sacrifices to Ball. The Deathbringer, however, was not so easily swayed. He tested the hero, asking them to slay the lawful good Holofont detective known as Valeria. But when Tav refused, Sarevok attacked. Sarevok was accompanied by the ghostly echoes of the past. Echoes of Ilasera, Sendari, and the High Priestess Amalissan fought beside him. The battle was not an easy one. Amalissan protected Sarevok under a sanctuary spell, while Sendari would slow the heroes while pelting them with necrotic damage. Ilasera would haste the Deathbringer while weakening the wizards by countering their spells. Sarevok was a brutal fighter. He was a swift and deadly fencer on his own strength, but while hasted, he was an unbeatable flurry of slashes and thrusts. He called upon dark magic, with spells like Inflict Wounds and Power Word Kill. When Sarevok eventually fell, bested by Tav's hand, the remaining echoes became enraged. Suddenly they got new spells, and began to assault Tav with Guiding Bolt, Spirit Guardians, Blight, and even Cloud Kill. Some would say it was by their skill, others say it was only by luck, but somehow Tav and his allies survived the fight. The outcome? Sarevok Anchev was dead once more. It's sad to look at the path of Sarevok. The man never had an easy moment of life. From being abandoned as a child to being raised as a weapon, and even finding himself time and time again returning to the toxic relationship that was he and Ball. Some could look at him and ask why. He'd been given a second chance, and he even tried to live it, but eventually he returned to the path of darkness. Why? There are studies on those who join cults or dark religious organizations and the pattern that these individuals seem to follow. While many factors always come into play, the most common one is that the person, even the most highly intelligent of people, are simply trying to overcome their feelings of loneliness and alienation. Sarevok had lost so much in his life. He lost both his mother and his adoptive mother. He lost Tomoko and Cathandria. And after a long life, even lost his brother. Sarevok was alone. So when Ball appeared before him, recruiting him once more, I suspect it was not the power that won Sarevok over, but instead it was the sense of belonging that he would finally feel. Well, Vega, it seems that my tea has run dry, which means my time is up. Oh, and look at the time. I got absolutely none of the restocking done. Good work, Vega. You are very good at keeping me lazy. Anytime you want to hear more stories and lore about the darkest villains from the darkest realms, you come find me, Vega. This has been the Dastardly Decimal System, and once again, I am your librarian, Castor Cain. Do you love the Dastardly Decimal System and want to support us? Check out our new Patreon. Members will get access to show notes, official artwork, our new bonus episode series called Cleaning Up After Tea Time, and of course, plenty of cat pics of Vega voice actors Vash and Zid. You'll even be able to suggest a topic for a future episode. Check it out at patreon.com/Dastardly Decimal System. If you're not financially able but still wish to support us, suggest the show to a D&D loving friend. It really helps us get noticed. The Dastardly Decimal System can be found on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at DD System Podcast. That's Delta Delta System Podcast. Drop us a message and say hi. Vega always loves the attention. This podcast was produced by Midnight Reading Audio, a division of Midnight Reading Publishing. The voice of Castor Cain is Larry Gent. Hi. The voice of Vega is provided by my cats, Vash and Zid. Music was Moonlight Sonata by Calvin Clavier from Pixabay.com, licensed under the Creative Commons. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening.